your source for all things Texas Tech. This is the Ask Level podcast from Double T 97.3.
Welcome to the Ask Level podcast. Welcome back. Alongside Chris Level, I am Chois Woodman. Thanks once again to our friends at Cantex Roofing and Construction for sponsoring this podcast.
I'm Mike Hebert, owner of Cantex Roofing and Construction. Every day is game day, and we'll get it right when it comes to your roofing, construction, windows, and mirrors. Call Cantex Roofing and Construction today. Together, we are one serving you.
Level, how we doing? How's the Thanksgiving, all that stuff?
Well, it was, Thanksgiving was okay. We traveled, obviously, on that particular day, so I spent most of my Thanksgiving with you. The game, it was just more fun than I could stand. Thoroughly, I thought you'd have a hard time winning, but I wasn't expecting that.
I don't think you could have drawn it up to go any worse than it did for Texas Tech. Any better if you're a Longhorn fan.
Well, except for a lot of those field goals could have been touchdowns.
Fair. See, look at so you. You found the ray of sunshine. The one ray from that game. Oh my goodness.
Interceptions bouncing off of a shoe.
Seriously, everything that could go right.
Block punts.
Seemed like it went right for them.
Returns. For touchdown. Yeah,
was. I've been hanging out with you on these football trips for the last 2 years, and easily the most miserable one we've had in the Joey McGuire era. Not even close,
and that's what Joey kind of said to me after the game was over, is that there hadn't been a lot of this for us. Last year versus Baylor was as close as you're gonna get to that feeling where you just kind of got beat, or showed, or however you want to phrase it, because there's probably a little bit of both. I don't know.
Yeah.
But you also had a team just sitting there waiting on you, and they just kind of blew up on you a little bit. And I didn't think at times Texas played particularly well, specifically Quinn Ewers. I didn't think he played particularly well. And I thought Texas's red zone issues will continue to be a problem for them. But it was just way too much. Bigger and faster usually almost always wins, and that's what Texas typically is, but they're more so that this year than usual, because the bigger part was much more noticeable up front than I had remembered. And when you don't have people like Jalen Hutchings going, and it just you needed to play. You didn't have to play perfect, but you just couldn't get much figured out, couldn't get any offense going. Just really couldn't stop them on defense. You slowed them a bit at times, but then the special teams aspect was just a bit of a nightmare, which had been such a bright spot for you all season. Been a big reason why you'd won 3 in a row going into that one, and why you're bowl eligible and all those things. And it just that was the phase that I think, again, Joey said that after the game, was like, I would have lost a lot of money betting that would have happened to us in that aspect of the game, but it did, and there you go.
Yeah, like to your point, the last 2 years, even that Baylor game, I'm pretty sure at one point in the fourth quarter, early in the fourth quarter, it was still a one possession game. You just haven't had any of these true blowouts that you've experienced in the last 2 years. And you said something to me, and I think John, before the game, you said, hey, Texas hasn't played their best, hasn't put it all together. I hope it's not tonight. And that was the closest we've seen, I think, to Texas putting it all together. So it was that perfect crap storm for Texas Tech.
Sometimes it's when you play people.
So much.
And they had messed around with Houston, with Kansas State, with Wyoming, with TCU.
Yeah.
And won all those, but they had a hard time putting them all away. And I think in 3 of those 4 that we just talked about, they didn't cover what Vegas thought, but they certainly put what I'm sure most will feel like is their best game together easily on the season. And it just so happened it was against you and national television. But I won't miss going to Austin at all anymore. That was yeah. So anyway, but that was our farewell trip to the ATX. So
Yeah,
good riddance.
agreed. Yeah, that was
Yeah,
my first trip and last trip.
you've been outscored 127-42 in your last two games there. I've seen that movie, unfortunately,
Gross.
way too many times. I mean, I remember going in '05 before I was actually doing radio, but was on the sideline for that one. And you were, I think, you were like top 15, and Texas was like top two
Yeah,
or three.
Tech was undefeated at that point.
Game day was there, and I
Yeah.
think that one ended up like 45 or 52-17.
Yep.
So it's just unfortunately there it's been tough. Now 15 and 17 were different, but I don't know if Texas was quite as good. Anyway, but moving on, yeah, you gotta just it sucks because you had a lot of feel good going, and then you kind of get punched in the mouth, and now you gotta kind of sit there and deal with all that, and wait for a bowl game bid, and which may not be near as good of a bowl game as what people wanted, but this is the price you pay for not beating the West Virginias or the BYUs that were winnable games earlier in the season, because you're going to end up playing a bowl game likely before Christmas. And ironically enough, because I'm sure there's bowl game questions out there, the one thing that would help you, you want to avoid
winning.
a bowl game before Christmas?
That's
it's
it, right?
Texas going to the playoff.
Oh, man.
So what are you willing to stomach out there, folks?
Give me Shreveport. Come on.
Yeah. Man, so that's kind of where you're at.
Yeah. So let's look a little bit at that. There was one question about a bowl game, and then we'll get to the full questions, basketball, because there's not a whole lot to, dissect through the Texas game. It was what it was. But bowl game specifically, the one question we had was, does Texas Tech have any chance of being outside of Fort Worth, Dallas, or Shreveport? Or is it pretty well set that it's going to be one of those three?
There's a chance. I mean, I've actually seen, again, the projections are tricky. These are people kind of filling out a template,
Yep.
and it's a guess. What you have to understand about bowl game selections is, yes, there's a pecking order, but it's kind of like, and this is dicey. It could benefit you at times, and it could not be a benefit to you at times. So it kind of works itself out, I guess, over the course of. But it's a pick for the bowl game. They can kind of do what is best for them in order to sell tickets, and how exciting or how excited is the fan base or the team to be there. They have a bunch of opt-outs. I mean, there's all kinds of things that factor in. The conference can get involved at times as well, which creates some gray area, and just can say, hey, we can't really allow this to happen, kind of deal. But it's a money-making venture ultimately. Sure. And it's kind of like last year when, I think Tech fans, we beat Oklahoma. Why are we not going to Orlando in the Cheez-It Bowl? That's what I want to go to. Well, guess what? The Cheez-It Bowl at the time was like, you know what? OU Florida State, people are going to tune into that one. That's going to, it's going to sell some tickets. It's going to register on the viewership. So that's what we want.
Yep.
The end, even though OU was a 500 team. Now, in this particular year, it could benefit you in some ways, but because like the Armed Forces Bowl in Fort Worth is higher in the pecking order than Shreveport.
Right.
And they may pass over a West Virginia team or an Iowa State team to pick Texas Tech, because that's where, they may sell more tickets this way or whatever. Sure. So there's, politics, fan bases, all kinds of dynamics factor into the selections here. So, because I guess what I was going to say was, I've even seen you go into Montgomery, Alabama, playing in the Camilla Bowl, I think is how you say
the
it.
Old Burn. Oh, yeah, the Camilla Bowl, right?
Yeah, Camilla Bowl. Yeah, I think it's in Montgomery, Alabama. I saw that one projected by, I think, the folks at ESPN. Most folks have you in Shreveport, Troy, Cal. I mean, all those things, but ultimately, the only thing that will change, I think, out of that kind of window, in my opinion, is that Texas makes it to the playoff. And at that point, everybody kind of moves up a notch. that short of that, I think it's pretty much you're staring at Fort Worth or Shreveport, though. I don't think Dallas is a Big 12 bowl this year. I think Fort Worth and Dallas is like, I think one Big 12 team goes to one of those two games. I think this year it's Armed Forces. I don't think Dallas is going to factor in. Okay. But you also get into the mix, like, the Camilla Bowl is not a Big 12 tie-in. Sure. That's where it gets kind of tricky. So it's all about creating matchups, like you can kind of in a way make a trade, like, hey, we would prefer this team, do you want this? I mean, there's all kinds of those done, because ESPN owns most of these,
right?
And they they have the TV rights, and so they can kind of have some say in there as well.
And the fact that you got 9 teams in, but only technically 7 bowl tie-ins, maybe 8.
Well, and that's where the because
right.
I mean, your champion is supposed to go to the Sugar Bowl, the Big Six, or whatever it rotates.
Yeah.
But if somebody goes to the playoff, then it's like the Big 12 title game loser, I think, would go to the Sugar Bowl, and then everybody moves up a spot. So anyway, that's what I could tell you, but I think you need to be prepared for Shreveport or Fort Worth, in my opinion.
So realistic options, what would be Chris Level's pick, and what would be the best thing for Texas Tech, in your opinion?
I'd be willing to tell you that they're the same.
Okay.
I think Fort Worth is better than Shreveport, and this is why I say this. I think Texas Tech would want to avoid at all costs the Shreveport situation, although they may not have a say. Uh-huh. They could play their cards and say, well, this is not. But I mean, again, it's just going to fall the way it falls. And it's simply because I think your basketball teams and your football teams would essentially be playing at the exact same time, which hurts both crowds. It hurts viewership for both.
Yeah.
It hurts everything. And schools typically want to avoid that at all costs. I mean, you'll see kick times or tip times adjusted and moved to avoid those things a lot of the time, just because you don't want to deal with cannibalization to where, sure, you would love your people that would love to be able to be at both, to allow them to be at both. But you simply, if it's Shreveport, you're going to have, and if people are in the vicinity, they're going to have to make a choice. You can't be at both. I think the game in Shreveport kicks off at 8:15-ish that night. I think that's right. And I think you tip in Fort Worth that night against Vanderbilt at 6:30.
That's right.
At Dickies Arena. So for that very reason, I think that anything but the 16th would probably be best served for everybody involved. But again, and potentially would be a better matchup, I think, as well. So I don't know. That's what I would prefer. I'd be willing to bet you that Texas Tech's administration would prefer that, and playing in the Metroplex,
sure,
from a recruiting standpoint, would also benefit you as well.
Your mid-year enrollees too, that as far as bowl practices,
it's a bit
later.
A
week later, so that helps some. Yeah, there seems to be a lot of benefits to that one over Shreveport. But like you said,
and I saw the Camilla Bowl is on the 23rd as well. That would also, for various reasons, that would also benefit you. Nothing against Shreveport or the Independence Bowl, but I'm saying it's about when it is, where it is, all those kinds of things. But that's what I could tell you.
The one other one that if you get moved up, everybody got moved up a notch if Texas goes to the playoff. The one other that could be in play, I think next in the pecking order, is Phoenix on the 26th for the Guaranteed Rate Bowl. Still not likely, but they may want new blood out there. You never know what happens in that.
And I would, I'll be in the minority here, but I would not prefer that one because it's played in a baseball stadium.
Yeah, baseball stadium.
Teams on the same sideline. I'm sorry, man. I can't. It breaks. My brain breaks when I see this. I can't.
And that would be that's a Monday night game. No. That's Tuesday night game.
Yeah. Anyway. I mean, I'm not. It's not like go to Fort Worth or bust. I'm just saying. But if you're asking my opinion,
I think
my preference. But yeah, there's kind of some background there and kind of why thinking the way that I would think there.
Yep, think it all makes a lot of sense. All right, let's get a few questions in, and then we'll talk some hoops as they had a pretty decent trip to the Bahamas. Andrew says, "What are your honest thoughts about how this season played out? I love where the program is headed, but 6-6 closed out by a whipping to UT is hard to swallow after all the hype this offseason. Hope is not a strategy, but we are also told to keep hope alive. So give us hope, Level." I love that. He used both of them on you.
I know. That's my own lines, both of them being used against me. Yeah, well, it wasn't what anybody had thought or hoped.
Yeah.
I guess ultimately you finished 7th in the league. You end up tied with, I guess if you look at a league standings list, Kansas is going to be listed above you because they have a better overall record than you do. However, you have the same school record, or excuse me, league record, I should say, and you have a head-to-head win over them. So you're I guess tied for 7th, but you beat them straight up at their place. And you were picked to finish 4th in the league.
4th. Yes.
But I my thing was I thought two things. We talked all summer about, man, there's a realistic possibility you could be 7-5 or 8-4 because it's hard. Yep. I mean, like we said this repeatedly. I also said that I felt like you would be relevant. Okay, not that you would be in Arlington or be to win this league. I never said anything close to that, but I thought you would be relevant in every radio interview I did or any podcast, things like this. I thought you would be relevant into November for a spot in Arlington, and you weren't. Yep. And I mean, I think sitting there at 1-3, you're kind of shell shocked. At 3-5, you're like, "Ooh, this has a chance to go sideways in a hurry."
Yeah.
I think I wish I would have known what it looked like if Tyler Shuck and or Baron Morton would have been able to play healthy all year and just see what it looked like. And I think you could judge it a bit easier. It's hard for me to, and you can say all you want, you got to find a way to go win in BYU on a Saturday night with a third string quarterback. But I don't know if you were good enough to be able to do that. And maybe that's where you need to get to that point because ultimately when you judge a team, it's can you win games when you don't play your best? Can you figure out different ways? And I think at times this team did, but at other times you couldn't do it. And whether it's too many turnovers, not enough takeaways or sacks or QB pressures or whatever, because there's plenty of I know like Zach Kitley gets a lot of grief. Okay, I get it. But I mean, you look at some of the defensive statistics. You had your head coach and your head of personnel basically telling you Steve Linton and Miles Cole would be like first rounder types. Never materialized. You had 2 super senior defensive tackles, 2 super senior corners, super senior at safety, and so I think we're trained to expect a lot on offense and not as much on defense. But I think that, the defense at times needed to be a bit better. They had some health issues, but the quarterback issue on offense limits you a lot. It's just, so in a way, it's hard to judge it. I thought the special teams was clearly a bright spot all season. I thought you morphing into this running team was a bright spot and figuring out a way to win games and to kind of change who you were. I thought the receivers were just overall were quite a disappointment compared to kind of what we thought. And maybe shame on us for assuming that a lot of these guys would take a next step. Maybe it's just they are who they are, and things like that. But it does. It needs to be better. And ultimately, if you're going to take a next step, it'll be because Barron is really good and stays healthy. Yep. And if he is what you hope he is, and he can sustain some health, then I think you'll like what you see. If not, you could still be sitting here spinning your wheels and all those things. So I guess that's ultimately how I would judge it. But in no way was it what you wanted or set out to do. It was a disappointment, I think. But you salvaged what you could of it, but it's very frustrating because you'll say goodbye to a lot of really good and old football players that you kind of thought, oh man, this kind of all falling in line here. Boy, you could make a lot of noise. And what's funny is you weren't even ranked in the preseason. I mean, but I think people have this mindset that you were like, we were, no, you weren't. Go back and look at the polls from like week 0, week 1. You were like others receiving votes column across the board. So there were some people that doubted you. And just unfortunately, it appears that they were mostly right. But yeah, 7th place in the league, not what anybody hoped for.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's saying that it was what they hoped for. I do think, and agreeing with you, it could have gone a lot further south than it did. I mean, you're sitting there at 3-5. A lot of people thought it was going to go way worse, and you won some close games down the stretch, but this was not where people hoped. And this one ties in. This is another question from this one's actually from the email. It says, Level, where'd it go? Sorry. Okay, Level, will this team, knowing what you know about this team, will this team be better than 6-6 next season? So this is before anything you know on.
I know, and that's the tricky part. You don't know it's unless what I told you about Barron. Okay, but the main concern I think with your team this year, one of the main concerns, and I think it is as you transition with the portal and kind of putting your team together for next year, you have got to be better up front on specifically on the offensive line.
Yeah.
I think you've gotten, and until you get better up front, I think you're going to be limited, and it's going to be a struggle. Because I think when this program was at its best, you were really good up front. And I think you've had some pieces that have been really good at times, that have been mixed in. But overall, it's got to be better up front. And you had, the injury to Cole Spencer. Then you have Rusty Stats, who's got an elbow issue. And you've got Jacoby Jackson, who's got a back and I think a shoulder issue. And it's like, but those are the best you've got. There is no, there was no, let's give so-and-so a chance. Ty Buchanan was as close to that, but he missed a month of the season because of an injured arm. And there's just not anybody waiting in the wings. Because the tricky part here is, I think a lot of what you like on your roster, and this doesn't go just for offensive line, is the guys that redshirted this year. But are they ready to be turned loose up front in some of these games? And can you depend on them, or can you bridge the gap until they can grow up and get another year of seasoning and all those kinds of things? So that's kind of the dynamic that you're going through right now. And that's why you'll hit the portal, I think. And that's why Danny Salee, the junior college defensive tackle that goes about 350, was much needed. You didn't want to go at it minus Tony and Jalen with what you just had coming back, and then the high school signees. You've got to go add some age and girth, and you're going to do the same thing on the offensive line as well. As many as you will sign, those guys need to be in the weight room and living in there, but you're going to have to go get some ready-made dudes and try to see if you can make it go that way. So that's what I would tell you. But unless that gets better, you're going to be mediocre, Yeah. And Joey needs this. He says it all the time. Mass kicks ass. Big people beat up little people. This is what this is. He knows this. They're trying to address it, but until you can grow your people up and sprinkle some in it, and then get the pipeline rolling, it's going to be a bit tricky.
From the Twitter, once again, Leah asks, "How is Jackson Knotts?" We heard a follow up on Cam Watts. So glad to hear he's okay. How's Jackson doing?
I don't want to speak for anybody, but I think Jackson's probably played his last football here. Unfortunately, I think it was a knee issue, and I don't gather that it's good. I don't really know specifics there, but I love that kid. He's been awesome since he's been here, and it's guys like that. That's what college football is all about. Rare is it? Obviously, you said Kim asked this question.
Leah did, actually.
Leah, sorry. I don't. Why did I say Kim? Where did Kim come from? Okay, Leah. Thank you. But Leah knows who he is. Most don't, nor do most care who the deep snapper is. Because the only time you hear that name is when something goes awry. That's a good thing for Jackson Knotts. That means he's done a really good job throughout his career here. Always smiling, makes plenty of tackles on special teams. But I think he dealt with an issue there on the field the other night with a knee, and don't think it's good. But we'll see. Maybe that's maybe they got some good news or something like that. But I don't. And I think he's a senior too, so I think this was it for him.
Preston says, "What's the offense going to do moving forward?"
Is that the whole question?
That was it.
Okay.
Leaves it very,
Well,
very open.
you need to get better up front and you need to get faster. It's painful against a team like Texas when guys aren't open, they can't get open, and you can't block long enough to get them open. But you have, I thought, I've touched on this a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I think in some, depending on who you're playing, at sometimes or the scheme can do it depending on who you're playing. But against really good teams like Texas is, your lack of juice or speed is just so painful to watch. Like you feel helpless. And Taj Brooks, as good as he is, he's an in between the tackles guy, and he gets those tough yards. But there's no threat on your team, and you really miss Miles Price in that game too, specifically.
Sure.
Just because I think Texas' weakness is maybe over the middle right there, and you kind of miss that skilled slot that could have put some pressure on them, and they have a hard time chasing those guys around sometimes. But you don't have much juice at all, and this is why everybody's so excited about Micah Hudson, because he will provide some of this. I mean, I said this on the broadcast, but you hope that he's your Xavier Worthy, because I mean, that guy's not that big, but he's different. He's got some serious wiggle, juice, speed, whether it's punt returner as a receiver. I mean, he makes something out of nothing. I mean, and you need more of these types of guys. And so you hope that TJ West, DJ Crest, Colby Volson, maybe, Anquan Willis, Cameron Dickey coming in, whoever else you bring in from the portal, that Coy Aiken continues to develop. Dre McCray gets better in his senior year as he kind of showed some flashes. But yeah, you're too slow, and you're not near as good up front as you need to be. That's my opinion. That's my take. And I get it. And Zach has to figure out a way to make it work, whatever it is. And I think they tried to do that. But this isn't really a team that's just built to run it downhill. You managed to do that at times, but now you're losing a bunch of tight ends off of your roster. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to replace those maybe via the portal. Because Henry Teeter is done. Baylor Cup, I think, is leaving. And, and then Mason Tharp is your one scholarship tight end left. And he missed 5 games, this year, and missed a lot of time last year as well. So, you've got a chance to, but it's easy to sit here and say, you need to go bring in a bunch of good offensive linemen and tight ends that are ready to make, well, everybody wants these types, right? So, it's easier said than done on trying to get some of the big boy issues fixed up front and to get faster. Because guess what? If you can really run, Texas Tech won't be the only one that wants you.
Yeah. No doubt. So, one more question. This is non-Texas Tech related, but this one just says, Level, have you ever seen anything like how A&M handled the Mark Stoops situation, where it seems like the crowd influenced the decision?
Well, I mean, who knows what is true?
Sure.
But the coaching searches or hires, I've been through a million of them, way more than I would prefer or count. And there's things that are going on behind the scenes, and things get reported, and it's hard to separate fact from fiction at times. Mike Elko could have been there. He was kind of rumored to be there, one of their top guys all throughout. I actually think it's a really good hire by them, but I also think that they could have hired themselves another 8-4 coach, which is what they just fired.
It's true.
So the coaching hires but like Tennessee had a jumbled search, at least from the outside in. Several schools have kind of gone through this. And so when you make your move, and this is why I think maybe Baylor keeps Dave Aranda, because
it looks like, according to Pete Thamel, that they're going to let him go another year.
Yeah, and because I think when if you're going to make a move, while it may make a ton of sense, you're like, okay, who exactly is going to fill this spot?
Sure.
And all these schools are searching. Are we going to find an upgrade? Do we kick the can down the road for a year? And it's painful. Yeah. These conversations are very painful for administrations because they can be costly. They can set you back. Yep. Some would argue you can't afford not to do it. Right. But again, there's only so many guys out there that are qualified for these jobs, and it's not, and it rare is it that you're going to ever find a fan base that goes, oh man, we hit a home run here.
Yeah.
This is great. It's like, well, he sucked here, or he wasn't very good there, or he has a drinking problem, or he messed around with his secretary 10 years ago, whatever. There's always something, and it's hard to find like an all-in kind of hire. I think A&M probably went with somebody like with the known versus the unknown, and they know Mike Elko. They've worked with him before. He's been there. He knows the landscape. Right. So it's about fit. He clearly has turned around Duke. By no means is it a guarantee, because he could be just more of what they just had. So. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it was interesting reporting for sure with the Mark Stoops stuff, and I think Mark Stoops is a good coach too. Although Mark Stoops has the best gig in college football.
Yeah, he does.
He gets paid nearly $10 million a year. There's zero pressure. It's a basketball school. Don't tell him that. It's a basketball school. As long as he goes to bowl games every year and wins more than he loses, he can stay there for as long as he wants.
Man, I mean, seriously, like he may have dodged a bullet with this whole thing, because you're right. He does have quite the posh gig right now
and probably a better gig now than he did, because I bet this interest enhanced his contract, which I think he was getting in the $9 to $9.5 million.
He was one of the highest paid coaches already.
And to give you an idea, I think, what did Joey get an extension the day of the bowl game last year? And what's Joey making, like four
something? Yeah.
4.5. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, so when you start talking about, at some level, these are vastly different conversations when you start talking about hires and buyouts. Yeah. And I was shocked to see that Houston was willing to pay Dana Holgerson. I think it was close to $15 million to go away. But, they obviously felt like, because, I mean, it's going to cost A&M, estimated well over $100 million when you factor in not just Jimbo, but his staff. And then you factor in they owe Duke $5 million. Mm-hmm. And then you have to pay Mike Elko on top of this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's in Texas Tech, I mean, it's like some of these schools just don't have that kind of money. A&M can kind of operate differently than a lot.
No question. All right, we've got a handful, just a little bit of time left, and I definitely want to spend it on basketball. The question can just start this off and leave it open-ended for you. It says, Level, this one's from Matt. Level, do your expectations change or anything from what you saw in the Bahamas this weekend? Or I guess it's week.
No, I don't. I think my expectations were that, Grant, this is going to be a bit of a grind, and I think it was in the Bahamas. I think, though, but when you show up and you play really well and they're going to continue to get better together, I think you can blow up on a team like Michigan, and they did. I think they pretty much controlled that game throughout. Mm-hmm. I think you had, you had, their head coach, Juwan Howard he was sitting on the bench because he's coming off of heart surgery, but he got thrown out. I think, it was just wild watching Amari Burnett kind of come full circle and get worked over by Texas Tech, even though he's looking over there and there's not any of the players are the same. It's two coaches removed from the last time he was in Lubbock. Is just kind of wild how that I thought about that. But I thought the Joe Toussaint, Joey T from the Bronx, man, I think he was very consistent. And when you won the two games against Northern Iowa and against Michigan, you turned it over a combined 17 times. So about, 8 to 9 a game.
Big difference.
And I think if this team will take care of the ball better, I really like their chances. That's something they're going to have to continue. Grant wants to run so much, though, that some of those turnovers, you got to live with it a little bit. But I thought the other big bright spot was Devin Cambridge. Really was, because Devin Cambridge is like Darian Williams. The criticism with this team when it was put together is, guys, it looks like we've put together a bunch of role players, and that's true. You did. Some of them, though, can give you a bit more at times, and I think Darian Williams and Devin Cambridge are just kind of almost too unselfish at times because they want to do what's best for the team. I'm just here to get a rebound and a putback or whatever. But Cambridge against Michigan was very aggressive. I thought he looked to score, and I thought that was a big deal. And if he'll take a next step and be consistent with it, I think it makes things easier for Joe and Pop and all those guys because you know what you're going to get from Warren Washington, who needs to be more selfish at times too. And I think maybe Kerwin Walton kind of emerged as maybe your eighth guy here. He got a lot of the minutes when you went to an eighth player.
Yeah.
He played as much as Lamar Washington did, and so maybe you've kind of found something there. If Kerwin can just guard,
Yes.
you know he can shoot it, but if he can just guard and do his part on defense, he'll continue to get more and more minutes. But that's about as deep as an EY played, I think, in the first game is kind of some backup post minutes. But yeah, I thought that it was a great trip for Grant's guys. Can't wait to go to Indy with him and watch him play Butler in Hinkle Fieldhouse.
How much are you going to nerd out for that? You're making that trip, right?
Yeah, I will enjoy that. I am without being corny. I think Hoosiers is the best sports movie of all time. I'm unabashed about that. I don't think there's a close second. Everybody's got their favorites and reasons and all those things.
Oh yeah.
I just think it's awesome. Our hickories won't crack, I think was what the sign said in the deal. David reached into the bag, took out a stone and slung it. I just remember all those lines, man, from that movie like it was yesterday. So I will channel my inner Jimmy Chitwood when we get there. I
want to see you channel your inner Gene Hackman and get tossed out and say something like, "You got pigeon bleep in your eye." If you do that to the ref, I'll be really impressed. But
he had that folded up like plays or that folder, and he never looked at it. He just held it.
He just sits there and
kind of hit it. It's like a newspaper, but it was brown. It had like a string that wrapped around it, but he never was out like looking at his call sheet or whatever it was back in the day. But yeah, we'll attempt to run the picket fence at him. On Thursday night. Yeah, but no, I'm enjoying it, and that's a good. They're 4-2. Their only losses are to Florida Atlantic and I think Michigan State. I think they're playing Boise. As you and I talk right now, I think they were up on Boise last time I saw. But as you and I tape this, so anyways, but there you go.
Boys, don't get caught watching the paint dry.
There you go.
We're gonna, that's gonna be a fun trip, cool trip, and I'll be excited to hear about it. But you're right, it's a good test too. Another one of those kind of milestones or I guess benchmarks to measure your team on. And
Butler and Vanderbilt, those are it. Those are because you're 1-1 in quad 2 games right now.
Mm-hmm.
The loss against Villanova, the win over Michigan, but those are your final two, and obviously Butler, depending on what they would do, that's not a neutral game. That's a road game. So I think that is a chance to be really good if Butler would go on and win a bunch.
Right.
Obviously Vanderbilt would be a neutral court game, but those are as good as it's going to get on paper anyway until conference starts.
No doubt. Level. Well, appreciate it. We'll do it again on the other side, and next time we do this, we will know a bowl game location, and we'll know the result from the Butler game as well. So
yes,
we'll talk to you then, man.
Sounds good, man. Appreciate it. Keep hope alive, everybody. I promise. Just keep it alive, even if it's just a little bit. Just keep it alive. Don't douse.
See.
You've been listening to the Ask Level podcast, powered by Double T 97.3.